So I promised you guys a breakdown of the Utah Jazz preseason, and here is that video. I was going to do it yesterday, but it needed a little bit more time to marinate in my head, especially after that Portland loss, because it gave us some questions. It gave us some questions. I have a few answers. I don't have all the answers, but I do have a few and a few speculations to make. But without any further ado, it's your boy Ray Hoops. If you're new to the channel, go ahead and smash that like button, subscribe, turn on post notifications if you're into NBA basketball, and let's go ahead and get into this breakdown. So obviously, starting out the preseason in quotation marks, we played against the New Zealand Breakers. Won that one 116-87. That was an expected win, but things looked pretty solid all in all, just all around basketball, right? Houston Rockets won 122-113. Then we beat Dallas 107-102. Guys are mostly healthy. Markkanen's our leading scorer. In that first game against the Breakers, obviously, Johnny had a game where he went off. Kind of quieted down a little bit as time went on and just because of minute fluctuations and everything. But he showed us a taste of what he could do, right? We saw Kessler be our leading rebounder for all but that game against Houston. And things were pretty interesting for the most part. We saw a lot of development, particularly the most positive signs from Keyonte George, who I made a separate video about talking about the dichotomy at the point guard position and what we could see going forward between himself and Colin Sexton, especially with this particular draft class coming in and who we will end up drafting with whatever top 5-ish pick that we end up having, so long as the tank goes ideally to score. But going forward, we ended up losing to San Antonio, which was expected 126-120. San Antonio, to me, is one of the most underrated teams in the league at the moment, and I am pushing the agenda of Stephon Castle and Victor Wembanyama being one of the most dynamically disgusting duos the league has ever seen. And I'm glad that it's going under the radar, so I can go ahead and claim it first and say it, and nobody can say that I stole it from their take. But Sacramento won that 114-117. That was a nail biter. That was a good game. Defensively, things weren't as locks as they were in some previous games as far as scores go, but it went down to the wire and we were able to close that one out. And then against Portland, everything hit the fan, right? The San Antonio loss wasn't bad. Like, obviously, yes, we gave up 126 points, but at the same time, it wasn't abhorrent to watch. But when you only put up 86 points as an offense and then also allow 124, even if it is a bunch of the bench guys playing for the majority of the time, I don't think any of the starters play more than like 19-ish minutes. It's still not something that you really want to see. And in that one, we really got dismantled kind of ugly. But before we talk about that specifically, let's just go over the numbers of just really who the main guys were. Obviously, the starters, I believe, that ended up in the last game will probably be our starters going into the first game of the regular season. You had, obviously, Keyonte George, Colin Sexton, Lauri Markkanen, Taylor Hendricks, and Walker Kessler. So that should be interesting. John Collins off the bench seemed to be the guy that had the fire lit under him the most. Obviously, in the press conference previously, he said that he really enjoys starting. That's something that's a mainstay of his game. And to not start is something that's basically unfollowable to him. And he is going to be coming off the bench, or at the very least, that's what that shows us at the very least from the preseason play, which isn't a bad thing, of course. His contract already is slightly overvalued, and that's why we are unable to offload him. But I think that him coming off the bench will give him the boost that he needs to, in a more constrained, confined set of minutes, show exactly to other teams what he's capable of doing, and maybe he can be moved at a deadline. If he doesn't, I won't be the most pissed about it because I actually am fond of him as a player. I just don't like the money the money that we're paying for him to be the player that he is. And at the end of last season, how he just kind of fell off a cliff from a three-point shooting standpoint. But still, overall, across the season, shot a pretty solid percentage as a bounce back from the previous year where obviously his hand injury was hampering his shooting motion. I would say that, honestly, Walker Kessler is going to be a big question mark for us. Some games he looked really good. Some games he looked like he was a little bit tapering off, a little bit fatigued. And maybe that's just, getting back into the swing of things. I'm willing to leave the door open and cracked for that excuse to be given. But Taylor Hendricks is going to be a big question mark for me because I want to push a Taylor Hendricks agenda, and he's not making it easy. He was the 12th leading scorer on the roster in the preseason games. For the points per game category, Lauri Markkanen in 5 out of the 6 games that he ended up playing in, 16.5. Then you had Keyonte George, basically 14. You had Svi with 12.5. You had Colin with 12.5. You had Johnny with 11.5. You had Jordan with 11. John Collins 10.5, Bryce with 10, Walker with 7, Drew Eubanks 7, Cody Williams 7, Taylor Hendricks 6.5, Potter 5, but he only played in one of those games. Kyle played in 5 of them and had 5 points per game. And then obviously Isaiah Collier, previous to the injury, had 4 points. Then you had Patty Mills playing in 2 of them, 2.5 points. Jason Preston played in 2 games, had 1 point. And Oscar Sheway actually played in 1 game, but didn't get any scores in that one. Now, from a shooting standpoint, Lauri Markkanen's percentages were not great from the field. Now, part of that is because most of his shot attempts did end up becoming 3-pointers. And by most, I mean roughly half, not the entire thing. But this is basically what I was expecting out of him. Now, for reference, overall, he shot 11 field goal attempts, give or take 0.2. He shot 39.3% from the field. From 3-point range, though, he was shot 4.6 attempts, and he was 39.1% shooting. I think that it's very reasonable for him to go up to 44 to 46-ish% from the field and still shooting that between 39 and 41.5% from 3-point range. I don't think that's a, lopsided thing to say from the free throw line. He shot 6.5 attempts in his 5 games, and he had 90.6% shooting, so I'm not concerned about that in the slightest. One thing to keep an eye on, though, is going to be his assists, and we'll talk more about that later. But as I said, the biggest riser was Keyonte George. He ended up shooting 48.8% from the field on 8.5 attempts, with 5.5 of those being 3-pointers, basically 6 to be honest with you, was 5.8. And he shot 44.8% from the field on those, which is a massive improvement, even night and day compared to last season's preseason. And I'm not saying he's going to shoot the exact same way in the regular season, but he's definitely going to be a hell of a lot better than he was last year for us. Svi only played in 2 games, but he was modestly productive, 42% from the field, and on 6 attempts from 3-point range, 33%. Colin obviously ended up taking, surprisingly enough, the second most field goal attempts, but that makes sense. 10 field goal attempts, 45.2% from the field, and 35.7% on 4.7 3-point attempts. The leaders in assists were Colin Sexton with 3.7. Then you had Keyonte with 3 flat. From a turnover standpoint, Keyonte was third on the team. Isaiah Collier is a interesting conundrum. He led the team with turnovers in his 4 games with 3.3. You had Colin second with 2.8 in his 22.5 minutes, and Keyonte George in his 1 less game than Colin Sexton and literally 1 less minute at 21.5 had 2.6 turnovers per game. Then you had Lauri Markkanen with 2.2 turnovers, tied with Jordan Clarkson as well. Bryce with 1.8, John Collins with 1.8, Walker Kessler 1.7, Kyle Filipowski 1.6, and Taylor Hendricks 1.3, so on and so forth. You get the gist of it. But the thing that really intrigued me was the fact that Isaiah Collier seemed like a very willing passer. He's just extremely turnover prone, which kind of gives me the energy of a younger Colin Sexton, where he's definitely willing to pass the ball, but he's also going to have the ball in his hands for a significant portion of a possession at times, and as a result, and being young-minded, he's going to turn the ball over a decent bit of the times. I think that it's going to be a very fixable thing. I think him being willing to pass and him being observant of the floor in general is going to put him light years ahead of where Keyonte George was at the beginning of last season. But I think Keyonte George obviously has the edge right now because he's just honestly less turnover prone. I wouldn't say that either of them are a better passer than Colin Sexton, but either way, they're all going to get their reasonable reps at the point guard position, with Keyonte George getting the lion's share of them, because I think Colin Sexton's probably going to get slotted in at that 2-guard spot. Now, I would say that obviously Keyonte was our biggest riser. Isaiah Collier has some question marks, and his shooting was bad. Now, he only, granted, shot 3.8 attempts in each game that he played, but he shot 26.7% from the field and 20% from 3 on 1.3 attempts a night, which isn't great, but from the free throw line on his 1.8 attempts per game, he shot and hit all of them. So, I mean, there's a silver lining kind of there, but he's a very raw prospect. Jordan Clarkson was decently efficient, shooting 51% on 7.5 attempts. He shot 33% from 3 on basically 2 3-point attempts a game. Bryce was modest, shooting 42% from the field and 40% from 3-point range on 3.7 attempts, which is something to keep in mind on. And Kyle Filipowski, even though I think he's going to spend a lot of time in the G League, ended up shooting 43% from the field and a modest 27.3% on 2.2 3-point attempts per game. So Not great, right? I think he's a lot better than that sample size, but uh, the minutes just weren't there for him a lot of the times, and him just having the opportunity to get acclimated to that new role is not going to be easy. In the preseason, in the 5 games that he played, he averaged 13.2 minutes per game. Even in games where he's not in the G League and he does get a call up, or say Larry Markin is out on a random back to back and he ends up getting some minutes, those are going to be the type of minutes that he plays. So he needs to learn how to be efficient in a very small span of time, small space, and then as his role increases over the next 2 to 4 years, I think he'll end up being not only a extremely efficient scorer, but he'll be extremely necessary. Now, I would like to see how locked in he is on defense. I saw him buying in a lot more as time went on. And while we had a very small sample size of minutes to play on, and this is the preseason, I do see the ability to be a above average defender. I'm not going to sit here and say elite, right? But I'm going to say definitely he has the physical tools and the understanding of the game to be an above average defender. That's not crazy to say. I don't think that's a hot take in the slightest. I have to talk about Taylor Hendricks. There's two things that I want to knock out in this video, most importantly. And one of them is him. The second is Larry Markkanen's passing. I guess Walker Kessler kind of slides his way in there, but I already said basically what I had to say about him tapering off. He didn't attempt a three-pointer in this span of preseason games, though. He played in all six. So I think it's safe to say that he won't have very much of a pick and pop game. I think that the dribble handoffs will also be a big role for him, obviously on the perimeter, but that's really probably going to be the extent of it. He's probably not going to be a short corner shooter. I don't see a world where that is a likely expansion of his game. But to look at Taylor Hendricks, remember, he was drafted above Keyonte George. Keyonte, I believe, was 14. Taylor Hendricks was like somewhere in that 7 to 9. Either way, doesn't matter, right? He was drafted above Keyonte George. People were like, oh, he's buns because he spent so much time in the G League and Keyonte was playing in the starting lineup for a significant portion of the season. It's like, well, no. Taylor Hendricks is just a more raw offensive prospect. Defensively, I love what he does, right? He's not always going to shackle somebody to the earth, but he's going to be very switchable. He's going to give maximum effort, and he's going to get you stops. He's going to get you turnovers. He's going to get you blocks. He's going to get you steals. He does that sort of thing. A caveat to that is that offensively, just as much as he gives you defensively, he does not or has not recently given us offensively. Now, he ended up playing in 25.6 minutes per game. He had 6.7 points, as I said. He shot 6.5 field goal attempts, shot 39.5% from the field. And on 3.8 of those, literally slightly over half being 3-point attempts, he ended up just shooting 26.1%. Now, from the free throw line, in his 0.8 attempts per game, he did shoot 80%. So, I mean, that's a very, very, very small, silver lining. He had 4.2 rebounds, 1 assist, 0.7 steals, 0.8 blocks, only 1.3 turnovers, but that goes just more so towards the time that he has the ball in his hands than anything else in his role on the team. So I'm not really impressed by the low in turnovers, despite decently high minutes in the games. He's making it hard for me to push an agenda about him. I'll put it like that. I love what he is defensively. I already said that. Offensively, we already know he's not the greatest creator of his own shot. We know that a lot of his shots are going to come off of kickouts, off of just, swinging, making the extra pass, him being in the right place at the right time. He is a ready lob threat a lot of times. He's going to be great in pick and rolls, I definitely believe. But he's just going to take some more time. And I think that since we're going to be tanking this year anyways, him starting at that power forward spot, allowing Larry Markkinen to start at that, small forward spot is going to be the best for both of them. The reason why I said those two are the main people that I want to talk about towards the end of this video is because offensively, if he's going to be a part of this future, he looks like a Jared Vanderbilt right now. I know last season he shot really good from three, so I'm not going to sit here and act like, oh, the preseason, he lost his jumper, it's not going to happen. He's Mikal Bridges. No! I'm not going to say that. But I am going to say that I would like to see him expand his bag just a little bit more. I would like to see him take a couple guys off the dribble. I don't want it to be a consistent mainstay of his game because that's not part of the offensive system, at the very least, that Will Hardy has had the guys running. But I would like to see him being capable of it. A lot of times it's not about, what's the saying? If you're incapable of harming people, you're not a nice person. You're just a person that's incapable of hurting people. But if you are capable of doing something bad and you choose not to do that bad thing, then you can call yourself a nice person. How that relates to the game of basketball is quite simply, you don't have to ISO every possession. But having that in but you can't sit there and act like you're one of the best in the league or one of the best at your position if that's not at all a part of your game. If you can't create your own shot at all, even mediocrely so, you can't call yourself one of the better players at your position because whether you do it or not is irrelevant. You being capable of doing it is the part that matters. Because there's a lot of guys that are able to do it. There's a lot of guys that are going to hit certain shots. If you are incapable 95% of the time of hitting that shot, you lose a lot of value because you can't do it. If we can force you into a position to where you can be ineffective and teams challenge you and they say, you know what, his shot diet has a lot of catch and shoot threes. Let's make him take those off the bounce. Let's make him take those off the dribble. Let's make him take some step back threes and see how he does. Right? Let's make it difficult. Run him off the line. If they try and run you off the line and you have no bag as far as getting run off the line and how you're attacking downhill, finding the extra pass or throwing the lob or whatever that may be, then you're SOL because you're beat. That's not part of your bag. And it's not something that, oh, I practice it in practice, but I just don't pull that out in games like that. No, you just don't have the tools to deal with the mission. And for Taylor Hendricks, his is going to be being able to get his shot off, being able to get it off at a high rate, and being able to be efficient with it. And as long as the efficiency and the shot volume is there for him specifically, we're not asking him for him to be the top two, even top three scorers. But I'm going to, at some point at the peak of his career, expect him to give us 14 to 18 points on a nightly basis. Occasionally bust out for like 20, 22 maybe, right? I'm not going to sit here and say his career high is going to be 42 points in an immaculate performance. I'm not expecting that from him. But a consistent 15 to 18 at peak Taylor Hendricks, I think that's reasonable. Now, he is going to be a two-way player in my mind. A defensive specialist right now as he's a young player, and that's what's going to earn him minutes and keep him on the floor at times. And him being able to hit his three consistently will also allow him to be on the floor. But I think that he's going to have to expand his game a little bit. And that's what the preseason definitely continued to show me. And I was kind of apprehensive about talking about it because I'm very fond of him as a player. I just kind of wish that I could speed run the process and watch him just like quickly develop. But that's not how the game works. That's not how the world works, Lauri Markkanen, though. And as a matter of fact, we're going to talk about the Trailblazers game as a whole because it was abhorrently terrible. Lauri Markkanen in that one, that was the game where really his field goal percentage tanked and dropped under 40% alongside his three-point range shooting. In 17 minutes, the most any of our starters played was Taylor Hendricks with 19 minutes. He was 0 of 3. Lauri Markkanen was 1 of 9. Walker Kessler was 1 of 2. Colin Sexton was 3 of 8. Keyonte George was 2 of 6. They were blitzing us with length. They said last season we didn't have the length, we didn't have the strength and all that, all the size to really get guys uncomfortable. They said, you know what? We're going to do it this time. This man, Colin Sexton, in just 17 minutes had a box score plus minus of a negative 27. Taylor Hendricks had a negative 34 in 19 minutes. Lauri Markkanen was the best in the lineup at negative 13 in 17 minutes. So it wasn't good. It was borderline terrible, and there's no real great way of like dancing around the topic of it, to be quite honest with you. 86 to 124 is basically a 40-point game. There's no excusing the abhorrent performance. Even in this one, when Lauri Markkanen wasn't shooting well, he only had 1 assist. Colin Sexton had 1 assist. Keyonte George had 1 assist. Both of them had 3 and 2 turnovers respectively. Walker Kessler had the most turnovers for the team with 4. You had Lauri with 2. Taylor Hendricks had 1 turnover. He didn't have any assists, obviously. There was no great rebounding overall. Walker Kessler led the team with 6 rebounds. Obviously, he only played 12 minutes, so I guess there was a little bit of fire in him. John Collins off the bench, I would say probably was one of the better pieces. Bryce Sensabaugh as well. Bryce was 4 of 7, 2 of 4 from 3, 3 of 5 from the free throw line. Had 13 points, box score plus minus of a negative 10. John Collins, 3 of 6 from the field, 1 of 3 from three-point range. Had 5 boards, 1 steal, 1 block, 2 turnovers, 7 points. Box score plus minus, negative 11. A lot of guys played. Even Jordan Clarkson off the bench in 12 minutes, 2 of 5 from the field, 2 of 4 from the free throw line, 0 of 1 from three-point range. Had a box score plus minus of a negative 13 and scored 6 points total. So these guys didn't have a great showing at all. They had trouble dealing with the length. And we're not going to see length like the Portland Trailblazers rolled out this particular game on a night-by-night basis. But this is going to be a performance that, if it pops up and rears its ugly head in the regular season, we can't sit there and say, we didn't see this coming. No, we saw this coming. And it actually, side note, Donovan Clingan, oh my goodness. That man put on a clinic. 14 points and 20 rebounds, shooting 7 of 12 from the field, 0 of 1 from three-point range. I mean, he had 10 offensive, 10 defensive rebounds. The guy was a monster on the floor. He also had 4 assists on the side note. So I would have I don't know who I really wanted to contest and like really battle it out with him. Mind you, he ended up playing in just 24 minutes when he did this as well. But it just goes to show that the Portland Trailblazers are a little bit more of a formidable opponent than I originally thought they would be coming into this season. But, the regular season comes and they're just quite honestly not as talented as a lot of other upper echelon Western Conference teams are. So they're going to get beat on just as much as we do. But when we play them, I think that's going to be a very interesting game because I don't think it's going to be the easily winnable cakewalk that I previously assumed. And I don't think we're always going to deal with length of this magnitude and struggle against it this way. Keyonte George in particular was very out of sorts, but I wouldn't think too much about that. The biggest thing for me was Larry Markkinen. And I know I've said I want Larry Markkinen to increase his ISO operations and being capable of scoring out of his, just 8 seconds on the shot clock, give the ball to Lowry, get out of the way. Lowry, please, we need something to happen, right? I know that Colin Sexton would love to do that. I know Keyonte George has the confidence to do that. But Larry Markkinen is considered to be widely the best player on this roster. So I think that's a necessary bag to have in his pocket. A necessary tool to have in his bag. There we go. But it's not something that I want to see regularly, but I want it to be something that he can do. If you run him off the line, if you make it so that, you know what, Lowry, you're not getting any free three-pointers. We're not going to allow any catch and shoots to you. We're bottling that up. Like, that's not happening. Those one-dribble pull-ups, we're not having those. Can he do something else? Can he put the ball on the deck 3, 4, 5 dribbles and either get a dish out to the corner, swing it back to the ring, reset it, get into something else? Can he be the offensive hub to a certain extent? Because he's never been a particularly great passer in the system that we've run for the Utah Jazz. But last year, I don't even think he averaged more than 2 assists. I could be slightly wrong, but I know for a fact he didn't average over 4. So I would say he was probably in the ballpark of a 1 to 2.5 assists last year. He doesn't really pass the ball a lot. But he also doesn't really have to because most of the shots that he took last year, particularly his three-pointers, were basically all assisted. So somebody's swinging him the ball and he's just shooting it as soon as he catches it. Like, that's where the majority of his three-pointers come from. One dribble pull-ups, he does those too. Those can also be off of assists. So a lot of those don't require too much of a thought process behind them. It's just get the ball, get the shot up. I would like for him to be capable of getting more assists, being more of an offensive hub piece coming into the season. And because there's no expectations and the only thing we're expecting to be is bad this year, he will have the most opportunities in his career to improve that side of his game. He could turn the ball over 5, 6, 7 times, and we'll be like, oh my gosh, he turned the ball over a lot of times. But he had 4 assists, though. That's more than he usually has. And, like, we can play to the positives of it, right? And then we can kind of trust that Will Hardy will niche things down and make certain particular reads in the offense where out of a certain offensive set, he will have a bevy of options to choose from. There may be a corner kick out to Taylor Hendricks. There may be a lob to Walker Kessler. There may be another kick out to the opposite side to a Bryce Sensabaugh, to a Cody Williams, to a Colin Sexton sliding down from the wing, in a pick and roll situation, whatever the case may be. I just want to see Larry Markkinen become better with the ball in his hands as a offensive hub. I don't need him to hit a tween behind the back, sliding through the lane with a floater. Like, I don't need anything crazy like that. But being able to make some modestly difficult reads at times when things get muddied up and things get bottled up and your teammates aren't capable of playing up to your standard of play. Number one, can you get me a bucket? And number two, if the bucket is hard to come by, can you find the open man? And can you create a situation where your offense will have an upside against the defense and give somebody the opportunity to make a shot or make a play going forward? But that's going to be the biggest thing for me, especially looking forward towards this upcoming season. I think that out of everything in the preseason, besides Keyonte George, for the most part, being a really bright spot, all things considered, I think that is going to be the biggest thing for me personally to keep an eye on when it comes to Larry Markkinen, because I think that he's definitely capable of being I don't necessarily require him to be an elite passer, but if he can on any nightly basis give you anywhere from 3.5 to 6 assists, that's great, because there's going to be some games where things get difficult for him to find a bucket, for him to put the ball on the deck, and he's going to have to be the guy that makes that extra pass, that does the kick out, that throws that lob, that swings the rock one extra time. And I think that he's definitely capable of it. I see no reason why he should not be able to do it. And I would like to see more of it. And hopefully he does show that similar progress to, I guess, what Colin Sexton did, where Colin Sexton, even though the shot diet was a little bit different, Sexton was more so he was about a bucket every time the ball touched his hands. And then you slowly saw him mature and pass the ball more and make better reads. And then his assist totals went up to the point where over his starts, he averaged like 5.2, 5.3 assists a game, I believe, if memory serves me right. And his turnovers went down as well, which showed that not only was he trying to make the extra pass, he was making the correct extra pass. I think Keyonte George is going to follow a similar trajectory this year, particularly, and I would like to see Larry Markkinen make some mistakes in that realm, because those are the type of mistakes we want him to make. We want him to be willing to put the ball on the deck more, because when games matter, 2-3 years down the line, and we're trying to vie for a genuine playoff spot, we're trying to be a playoff team, Lowry is going to have to be at the top of his game. He's going to have to be able to put the ball on the deck and find a way to get a bucket. All the other players on the team will have to as well, but unless somebody supersedes him as the best player on the roster, Larry Markkinen, either way, is going to be a key cog in the machine, and he has to be able to make something shake. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Obviously, this was a very long-winded breakdown. This is to make up for all the preseason games that I did not cover. The Utah Jazz are about to start the regular season, and that means we will be bringing back our post-game podcasts, our post-game live streams, I suppose you would say. I'm going to make them, I'm trying to make it reasonable and probably say we'll go anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes depending on the day. The only day that I probably won't be covering them is probably on Sunday nights, just because I work overnight on Sunday nights. But I might do a car stream. I know some people, the real ones that watched last year, y'all remember those. But either way, tune in. If you like the Utah Jazz, go ahead and smash that like button, subscribe, turn on post notifications. If you made it this far in the video, I freaking appreciate you, man. Love you. Or ladies, and any ladies that are also Utah Jazz fans, you know what I'm saying? Shout out to you guys. All like 4% of you guys that watch the channel. But, you know, the NBA season is back in full swing. I'm glad to have you guys along for the ride. And as always, it's been your boy, Wraith Hoops. Go ahead and smash that like button, subscribe, turn on post notifications, become a member of the channel, drop a donation, help support the content. And good morning, good evening, or good night, no matter where you're on the globe watching. Thanks for tuning into this video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.